Imagine sitting in this really shadowy room halfway across the world, right?
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and you're hearing an incredibly wealthy hunter just slide an offer across the table. $5 million US.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 5 million. That is the bounty supposedly being floated by these high-end international syndicates right now.
Just for access to the animals.
Exactly. Paid out just to gain illegal access to the big game roaming the protected jungles of Nepal.
That's a staggering amount of money.
It really is. And when that kind of money is weaponized against an endangered species, the local authorities need an incredibly robust defense system.
Right, obviously.
But what if the only viable defense mechanism requires the systematic exploitation of, well, another endangered species?
Yeah, that creates a fascinating and honestly terrifying ethical paradox.
It really does.
Because you are essentially forced to weigh the survival of wild tigers against the suffering of captive giants.
Exactly. And welcome to our discussion today. We are incredibly glad you were sitting in on this conversation with us.
Glad to have you here.
Before we really unravel this whole thing, please take a quick second to like and subscribe to this show on whatever platform you are using right now as you listen.
It really does make a huge difference.
It does. And why? Because it tells the podcast distributors out there that you actually like this show, which means we can keep going.
Okay.
It's just a simple gesture that helps keep us making original ad-free content for you.
So what are we getting into today?
Today's subject, verbatim, is elephant tourism in Nepal. Cruel or an important necessity?
It's a heavy topic.
Yeah.
And we are analyzing this through three very distinct lenses today.
Right. Let's break those down.
First, we are looking at material from World Animal Protection, which advocates for a total, uncompromising ban on elephant tourism.
Makes sense. They're a major voice in this.
Second, we have sources arguing exactly why elephant tourism is an absolute necessity for conservation in the region.
Okay. So the total opposite perspective.
Completely.
Yeah.
And third, we are incorporating the nuanced field notes of David Ways. He's a Nepal guidebook author who delves into all these uncomfortable realities that are, rarely mentioned by either the activists or the local tourism boards.
Right, the stuff that kind of falls through the cracks. And our mission for you today is to look past the viral videos, past all the social media outrage, and really understand the complex, often contradictory reality of wildlife conservation.
Yeah, because it's never just black and white.
Exactly. We are not here to take a side or tell you what to think. We're just reporting what these sources claim and trying to figure out how these puzzle pieces actually fit together.
So to start, the catalyst for the current global debate really centers around the recent 18th and 19th Elephant and Tourism Festivals in Saraha.
That's a major hub located in Chitwan, right?
Yes, exactly. And historically, this event drew huge international crowds. It was a massive draw.
But lately, it's been drawing massive international fury instead.
Yeah, a lot of backlash. PETA and World Animal Protection have laid out some visceral allegations against the festival and the wider industry in Chitwan.
Yeah, the sources detail these viral videos showing handlers striking elephants repeatedly during the festival games.
Right, but the outrage isn't just about, like, a stray hit with a stick.
No, it goes much deeper than that.
It focuses on the fundamental training methods used to essentially break the elephants into submission.
Yeah, we're talking about the historical use of heavy chains, physical punishment using metal rods. I think they're known as ankus.
Yes, the ankus.
Right.
And also the deeply distressing separation of young calves from their mothers.
It's just heartbreaking to even think about.
It is. To really understand the mechanics of this, you have to look at the psychology of the training. A human being cannot physically overpower a 3-ton animal.
Right, obviously not.
So the traditional breaking process, which is often called the funja in parts of Asia, is designed to establish absolute psychological dominance.
So they completely break their spirit.
Pretty much. The animal is isolated, its movements are entirely restricted, and it faces physical punishment until it realizes that resistance is just futile.
Wow.
The whole goal is to make the elephant fear the handler more than it fears anything else in its environment.
It makes me think of an analogy. Compare that to the historical breaking of wild horses.
Okay, yeah.
That was rough and violent too, but a horse was essentially broken to accept a rider and to run, which is somewhat natural to them.
Right.
But here, we're talking about highly sentient, incredibly intelligent, endangered giants.
Exactly.
And in the context of these festivals, they haven't just been broken to carry a rider through the jungle. They have historically been forced to play human sports.
Like polo or football.
Yeah. For roaring crowds. It's just so unnatural for them.
And the global travel industry has severely reacted to this imagery. I mean, there's a massive trend of travel companies simply dropping any wildlife entertainment from their itineraries.
Because tourists are increasingly demanding ethical sanctuaries, right?
Precisely. If we look at the historical timeline, back in 2017, Tiger Tops, which was actually a pioneer of ecotourism in Nepal, they officially ended a 35-year tradition of elephant polo specifically to support animal welfare.
35 years. That's a huge shift.
Massive.
So if you are listening to this, you might be thinking what most international observers think. Just shut it down, ban it entirely, just like Tiger Tops did.
Which is a very natural reaction.
But if this practice is so universally condemned, why is Nepal still operating an elephant tourism economy?
Well, to understand Nepal's reliance on this, you have to completely separate its practices from countries like Thailand or India.
Oh, okay. How so?
In many parts of Asia, elephant tourism is purely for entertainment or historical logging. But in Nepal, the dynamic is permanently tied to national park patrols and anti-poaching efforts.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If you just need to patrol a park, why use a captive elephant? I mean, we have jeeps, we have thermal drones.
Right.
Why rely on an animal that requires this brutal psychological braking process?
It comes down to the unique topography of Chitwan. The sources detailed that the tall elephant grass and the really thick, dense jungle vegetation make these areas completely impassable by any mechanical vehicle.
Really? Even a heavy-duty jeep?
Yeah, a jeep simply gets tangled and bogged down in the mud and grass, and the canopy is often too thick for aerial or thermal drones to effectively track individuals on the forest floor.
Oh, I see.
The elephant is literally the only vehicle that can quietly part that sea of grass.
So they use them to physically track the poachers.
Yes, and the results of these patrols are heavily documented in the numbers.
They actually work.
They do. These elephant-backed patrols are directly responsible for Nepal being one of the few countries in the world where wild populations of Bengal tigers and one-horned rhinos are actually growing year over year.
That's amazing, actually.
The rangers use the elephants to establish a presence that poachers just cannot evade. And furthermore, these animals act as vital community lifelines during crises.
Oh, you are referring to the 2017 floods.
Exactly. During the devastating mid-2017 floods, the rushing waters were way too powerful and debris-filled for boats or standard rescue vehicles.
Right, machinery just fails in those conditions.
It completely failed. So the captive elephants were marched directly into the dangerous floodwaters, becoming the only reliable rescue transport.
Wow.
They carried stranded locals and tourists to safety when everything else was useless.
Okay, so this brings us to a really uncomfortable realization.
Yeah, it does.
To protect the wild tigers and the wild rhinos from those syndicates floating $5 million bounties.
Who was we mentioned earlier, yeah.
Right. The local authorities essentially have to exploit the captive elephants.
Which introduces the whole economic reality of this situation.
Because keeping an elephant can't be cheap.
Not at all. Caring for these animals requires a staggering amount of resources. An adult elephant eats between 150 to 250 kilograms of food every single day.
A day. That is unbelievable.
It's a mountain of food. The cost to care for one elephant, including the massive food volume, the medical care, and paying the mahouts, those are the handlers, it runs about 150,000 rupees a month.
Which is an enormous overhead in that local economy. So if you pull the tourists out of the equation, who pays that bill?
That's the thing. Nobody does. An adult elephant can cost up to 15 million rupees just to purchase initially. The entire elephant economy relies entirely on tourism to fund the overhead.
So the tourists are basically keeping the whole system afloat.
Exactly. The money tourists pay for safaris and festivals, funds the massive food bills, pays the mahouts, and subsidizes the anti-poaching patrols.
Okay, so recognizing that massive tension between international animal welfare outrage on one side and the desperate need for conservation funding on the other.
Right.
The tourism industry in Chitwan has tried to find a middle ground.
They have.
But looking at our sources, we really have to question how much of this adaptation is tangible change and how much is just clever marketing designed to soothe Western guilt.
That's a very fair question. Let's examine the festival reforms. To appease activists, organizers in Sauraha implemented several changes to recent festivals.
Like what?
Well, they reduced the event duration from 5 days down to 3.
Okay.
They changed the full elephant football matches, where elephants had to aggressively run across a field, to static penalty shootouts.
theoretically reducing the physical strain on the animals.
Right. And for the beauty pageants, they replaced toxic chemical dyes with harmless sewing chalk.
Mm.
And for the picnics, they ensured all the food was pesticide-free and doctor certified.
I mean, that sounds great on a press release.
It does.
But animal rights activist Surjan Shrestha points out the fundamental flaws that remain.
What does he say?
Well, even in a penalty shootout, the mahouts are still pressuring the elephants to kick the ball to win.
Right, it's still a competition.
Exactly. And an elephant's anatomy is not designed to kick a soccer ball. Forcing them to perform that unnatural motion causes physical stress and joint pain.
That makes total sense.
And during the picnics, elephants are reportedly made to stand stationary in front of all this food and just wait until a chief guest finishes a really long speech.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. This highly irritates the hungry animals, which inevitably leads to the handlers striking them just to keep them in line for the cameras.
See, that illusion of ethical reform is one of the most crucial points raised by David Ways in his field notes.
Yeah, he really digs into that.
He critically analyzes this new trend of luxury resorts offering walk with the elephant packages.
Oh man, this detail is absolutely wild.
That's so telling, right?
Yeah, because the resorts introduced this walking package as the ultimate ethical alternative. Tourists pay a premium to simply walk side by side with the animal through the jungle, feeling completely absolved because they aren't forcing the elephant to carry their weight.
But Ways points out the inherent irony in that.
Which is?
How do you ensure a 3-ton animal calmly walks next to a tourist without suddenly deciding to wander off? Or worse, become aggressive?
You break them.
Precisely. Those ethical walking elephants are broken in using the exact same harsh, traditional Fajan methods as the riding elephants, or the patrol elephants.
Wow. So the foundation is exactly the same.
The fundamental mechanism of establishing total psychological dominance hasn't changed, just because the tourist is walking instead of sitting in a howdah on its back.
The animal still fears the handler's stick.
Yes. It is a beautifully packaged illusion tailored specifically for international sensibilities.
That is just, it's really bleak. However, the sources do highlight that genuine progress is slowly happening.
Yeah, it's not all completely static.
Right. Like private female elephants are now largely chain-free. They are tethered using ropes instead, which causes far less physical trauma to their legs.
It's a good step.
And there are new reward-based training methods being actively tested with the younger elephants. Plus, increasingly mahouts are shifting away from the metal ankus, replacing them with wooden sticks.
Those are small steps, certainly. But they do represent a tangible behavioral shift in a deeply entrenched traditional industry.
Right, changing generations of handler practices doesn't happen overnight.
Exactly.
So let's play the devil's advocate here for a minute. Let's ask the ultimate what-if question.
Okay, let's hear it.
What happens if the global pressure works perfectly, the activists win, and all elephant tourism in Nepal is completely shut down tomorrow?
According to David Ways and Insights, you wouldn't just see a localized economic dip, you would trigger the collapse of the entire ecological arch.
Really? The whole thing?
Yes. Think of the elephant economy as the keystone in a bridge. Pull the elephant tourism out, and everything crashes into the river.
Okay, walk us through that collapse. How does that happen?
Well, there are an estimated 100 captive elephants in Nepal, roughly 60 of which are used for official park patrols.
Right.
If tourism stops, the daily safari revenue stops. Without that revenue, there is absolutely no money to purchase the 150 to 250 kilograms of daily food required for each of those 100 massive animals.
And if you can't afford to feed the patrol elephants, the patrols stop, which means the jungle is basically left unguarded.
Which brings us right back to the syndicates you mentioned at the very beginning of the show.
The $5 million bounty guys.
Exactly. Ways emphasizes that the deeply organized, highly funded international poaching networks are the true existential threat to wildlife.
Not the locals.
Right. It is not the local tourism operators in Chitwan who are just trying to feed their animals.
So without the elephants parting that dense grass to maintain a patrol presence,
Nepal becomes an unmonitored free-for-all for poaching. It would completely reverse the growth of the tiger and rhino populations we talked about.
man, that's grim. And the tragedy wouldn't stop with the poached animals either. You have to consider the human-wildlife conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the elephant economy dies, local businesses, hotels, and restaurants close, people lose their livelihoods overnight.
And people need to eat.
Exactly. Farmers, desperate to survive and feed their families, would have no alternative but to expand their agricultural land directly into the protected forest boundaries.
And when human agriculture encroaches on tiger habitat, the outcome is just inevitable.
The wild animals raid the farms for easy food, or they attack livestock.
Right. And then the farmers, who are just protecting their livelihoods and their families, shoot the endangered predators.
It's a nightmare scenario.
Ways asks a very pointed question of the international community here. Who pays to stop this?
Well, it's definitely not the people demanding the ban, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without tourism money, who funds the park patrols?
Yeah.
The raw reality is that no international body is stepping in to unconditionally cover that massive multi-million rupee shortfall year after year.
It's easy to post a hashtag, but it's much harder to write that check.
Way harder.
You know, this glaring disconnect between the marketed, pristine ideal and the actual boots-on-the-ground reality was perfectly encapsulated during the April 2026 Wild Nepal Safari Mart.
Oh yeah, held in Mogoli.
Right?
The official rhetoric at that event was just soaring.
Very ambitious.
Administrators pitched tourism as the green oil for the national economy, a clean way to bring in foreign investment.
Green oil.
Yeah, and the official theme was rare, remarkable, and responsible. Officials outlined this grand vision of a greater Chitwan concept, seeking to link multiple protected areas into one multidimensional ethical safari product.
Rare, remarkable, and responsible. I mean, it sounds incredible on a glossy brochure.
That's in it.
But then David Ways offers his reality check. He asks, what exactly was done for sustainability on the ground?
The actual implementation.
Right. He observes that Saraha is rapidly becoming hyper-commercialized. Decades ago, it was a quiet, sleepy gateway.
And now?
Today, you've got massive, heavy diesel tour buses plowing right down to the river's edge. You have excessively noisy restaurants and bars filled with raucous tourists.
That can't be good for the wildlife.
It's terrible. That mechanical and human noise is literally scaring the borderland rhinos and crocodiles back across the river away from their natural habitats.
It perfectly illustrates the massive gap between high-level policy marketing and the actual ecological footprint of mass tourism. You can't just slap the word sustainable on a festival banner or safari mart and magically erase the heavy diesel exhaust. Or the fact that an elephant is still being struck by a wooden stick to ensure it behaves around the tourist buying those ethical packages.
It's just wild. We find ourselves staring at an incredibly tangled web. It's a vicious circle.
It really is.
We need the elephants to protect the wild tigers and the one-horned rhinos. And right now, the elephants need our tourism dollars to simply eat and survive the month.
It is a deeply imperfect win-win situation.
Imperfect is the right word.
Absolutely no one is arguing that the historical Fajan breaking process or the physical treatment of these captive elephants is acceptable by modern humane standards.
No one is defending the cruelty.
But removing the tourism economy completely without instantly replacing the financial mechanism that funds the patrols would almost certainly hurtle those wild endangered species toward extinction.
The tiger and rhino populations are only increasing right now because of these current highly flawed policies. Until humanity invents the technology to perfectly monitor impossibly dense jungles without disturbing the canopy, right?
Yeah, or until a massive, unconditional global fund emerges to pay for all these conservation efforts without requiring a return on investment.
Which isn't happening anytime soon, so this messy, compromised reality might just be the only functional shield these animals have against the poachers.
And understanding that nuance is the first critical step to actually making a positive, informed impact, rather than just reacting to the optics.
If you want a truly unfiltered, boots-on-the-ground look at what it actually means to navigate this incredible, complicated country, we highly recommend checking out David Way's The Longest Way Home Nepal travel website and his guidebooks.
They're excellent resources.
It's a fantastic place for anyone who wants to travel with their eyes wide open, really looking past the glossy marketing.
The field notes provide exactly the kind of context you need to look past the binary arguments.
We started today talking about a clean equation. You know, good guys, bad guys, broken or fixed. But the reality of Chitwan and Kathmandu and the dense jungles of Nepal shows us that saving the world is rarely a clean process. It requires really uncomfortable compromises.
It always does.
So we leave you with this final thought to mull over. If we, as global tourists sitting thousands of miles away, demand completely untouched nature and pristine animal welfare in developing
Which
nations,
is easy to demand.
are we willing to directly foot the massive ongoing bill to protect those habitats? Or do we just expect local communities to bear the physical and financial cost of our ideals completely alone?
Something to really sit with.
Think about that the next time a viral outrage video crosses your feed. Thanks for listening.